Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Hey Bill, how you doing today?
Angela, I've never been this happy. How about you?
Tippy tappy. So today, Bill, we brought in another guest whom I'm very excited about. Our guest today is DeeDee Fisher, a keynote speaker and creator of the CPL Framework, or Compassion, Process, and Learning. For more than 3 decades, DeeDee has helped leaders and organizations transform the way they communicate in moments of tension, uncertainty, and high stakes. Through her work and speaking, she teaches people how to move communication beyond reaction and into conversations that build trust, clarity, and real results. Thank you so much, DeeDee, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Yeah, given that introduction, it certainly seems like today would be a good time for us to be trying to figure out how to communicate better in times of high stress.
Yes, given the times we're in, yes, it would.
Absolutely. So getting into that, tell us a little bit about your background and the 3 decades that you've had, as a serial entrepreneur.
Sure. So, I grew up in a really small town in Idaho. Graduated high school with 30 people, and always knew that there was something different about me, different about the way I spoke, different about that I just didn't quite fit in. And I wish before I actually made some, errors in my life and had to backtrack, somebody would have said, I see this about you. But it wasn't until after I had gotten married and then said I didn't want to do it that my grandmother was like, what did you think you were doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you shouldn't be married here and you need to leave. I'm not sure where you're from, but you can't be here the way you are with these men. And even back then, I still, I've heard that message a lot. There's something different about the way I speak. There's something different about the way I address things. So even at 18, I had somebody saying that to me.
What do you mean? Yeah, tell us a little bit more about, what she observed in your conversations with men, for example.
So it's so easy now because we have the president we have to use him as an example because he is the example. Evangelistic speaking and statements without facts behind them and saying, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, but not talking about how it's going to happen. That's how everybody spoke around me. So my dad owned a gas station and I was raised between 2 boys and all the men that worked at the station and all the farmers that we supplied the fuel to. It was really there were very few women around. But when the men would talk to each other, it would just be a statement of POV. One of them, there's this great story about when a farmer has his hay down, if it rains, that whole crop is ruined. And we were supposed to deliver fuel into the combine in the field, and we weren't there. And the farmer came in, fire hot, and he was like, where's my gas? The crop's going to get ruined. And he was just saying what was happening, right? And so then my uncle, who also worked for my dad, was like, well, I can't deliver the fuel. We don't have any right now. And they just went back and forth like this for, what felt like forever to me was probably 15 seconds, but I was standing over here behind the register and I realized that they were sharing no information. It's like the little balloons, I could see it. And I just walked over and I said, his name was Mr. Johnson. He had said, his name's Bud. I said, Bud, we didn't deliver the fuel because we have none to deliver because our fuel truck was late. They have left. They are almost here. What we can do is as soon as it gets here, we'll have them fill our delivery truck, not the tanks underground. Then they can bring your fuel to you directly. That's all he needed. Right? All he needed was why it happened and when it would be solved.
Right.
But instead he's screaming what's wrong and my uncle is screaming why it can't be fixed. And I'm like, okay, I would just I could just always hear it. It's like that thing in Good Will Hunting when he's like, when it comes to numbers, I could always just play. There's always just something about the languaging that human beings used in my environment that I was like, this doesn't communicate anything. Like nothing's being said or exchanged or solved or moved forward.
Mm-hmm. And so
Okay,
you
I'm sorry, I have
only,
to interject. I think I'm going to vote to have you trying to do the mediating in Congress from now on, if that'd be great.
That'd be great. So the Undersecretary of Defense is a friend, and I was like, please get me on the comms team. And he's like, that list is so long, like how long people have been helping him get elected the last two times he's run. And I'm like, I know, but like, it would be so great because he wouldn't light me up at all. I'd just be like, whatever. Okay, moving on. Like, moving on to what really matters.
So do you have any idea how you came to that way of thinking, which I think is very powerful? I mean, people pick up sides, and this is not a political podcast, so it's just a discussion about what was effective and what was not. And so I'm wondering how you came to the recognition to be able to sort of step back from a communication between two parties that clearly are not, they're talking, but they're not listening.
Yep.
And so how did you come to that realization, if you could describe that perhaps?
I actually think that it is a gift. So it did come as a gift, right? Like nature or nurture, right? So there's something about me that I'm attuned to it. And then I was in an environment that didn't resonate with me. And so then along my career path, my mentor at University of Virginia, he teaches or he's retired now, but he taught at the Darden Business School. He told me when I started writing my book, he said, write stories in your life that are impactful and that you remember, and then you'll see the thread. All of those stories were some situation where there was a communication like that was disjointed, that was impactful to me, that I was able to see something that wasn't being seen, that I was able to, whether it was for myself or for somebody else, but to be able to sidestep and say, hey, maybe we could do it this way or that way, or to see the pieces that were missing. But it wasn't until during COVID, and I was doing a lot of consulting online, and I actually had clients who I was helping do team building, and they were saying, yeah, but I want you to talk to me about how you communicate. And I'm like, I don't, like, here's this message again, right? And I'm like, what is it? And so by being willing to ask somebody, what are you talking about? What do you see? And how is it different than what you hear from other people? That really started the investigation for me of like, what is this thread in my life of people saying the writing I was writing or this way I was speaking was so different. And then I sat down and said, okay, if I'm going to do this, take what's inside of me and bring it out, what could I call it, and how could I make it a process or a formula or a tool that can be replicated and that people could use any piece of it to make their communication better?
So, which is okay. So that's a great foundation. I'm trying to figure out. We use some political examples, but I'm sure people have other examples in their daily life of people who don't listen very well, and so they're talking, but they're not communicating well. And so you said something that was kind of important about you would approach them and ask them what is it they're trying to get to, which seems like a great way to start those kinds of conversations. Is that is that sort of describing the structure that you have set up, or is it more to it than that?
No. So if people often ask me, what one thing could I do that would change the dialogue that I'm having in my life?
Right.
And I said, figure out what feels authentic from this list. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Because the minute you ask a question that needs an answer, but it's authentic for you, you can stop a dialogue that's not working. And then where the tool comes into place is if you can actually be like compassionate that it's happening and not angry, right? Okay, this isn't working, and it's just not working because it's not working. Not add any meaning to it. Be compassionate for yourself and the other person that you're, or whatever you're seeing, that there's this situation that's not working. And then just start the process by asking a question. So like, say a boss who gave instructions for his team to do X, and then say they don't check in, they don't run a sprint or anything. They just come back like 3 weeks later and he expects the project to be done and they've done it another way. Of course, he's going to be frustrated, but if he'll stop and realize that whatever they heard wasn't what he meant, and whatever he said wasn't taken away as he intended, and come with an inquisitive mindset of like, wow, I didn't even think of doing this that way. How did you get there?
Okay, yeah, a very powerful approach. I mean, you threw out a terrific movie line. I'm going to come back to you with a TV series line. You know, it's the Ted Lasso "Be curious, not judgmental" approach to life, which I mean totally resonates. And we've had parts of this conversation before, and so that's so fundamental. And you talked about two really important things. One is the curiosity part, asking questions first. And second, being compassionate for yourself and the other party, which I would think is an extremely powerful tool. But I'm curious, was that something that you think? I know some of this comes from nature. You know, you have a gift, that's great. But is there mentoring along the way or advice you got along the way that sort of started to crystallize some of those thoughts for you? Because those are powerful tools, and I'm just wondering how other folks can sort of put that in the way they think about
Put it in
resolving
there.
these issues.
Yeah. So for me, it was my grandmother was a great mentor because she was a woman functioning in the same world I was. Now, she had owned the gas station before my parents. And watching her and how she did things, and then talking to her about it, because she was pretty strong. And I say, but you get along. And she's like, well, I just don't let them push me around. And she
Right?
was pretty tough, right? And at that generation, it was something else. And then really being present enough to see when I did something and it worked and when it didn't. And I remember, my dad's a pretty strong guy, and like having conversations with him, and I would clock, okay, that didn't work, or this did work. And like really watching the reaction of other people when they're in conversations, because it was a team, right? It was a big team. And the leader of the team would be him, and he would talk a certain way, and other people would react. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not getting us anywhere. And so I learned to just state an obvious fact, kind of like with the gas truck, just
Right.
state an obvious fact. And when doing that, you bring the energy in the room down, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when you left, your grandmother encouraged you to leave small town Idaho, and you left and you started your own path. And you had your high school graduation class was 60 people.
30.
You started
30.
30 people. 30 people. I
Yeah,
doubled
come
it.
on. Let's not talk about big schools. 30
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, my daughter's currently graduating with 500.
Right.
Right. Exactly. So then you go off and you've started your own adventure. And I'm curious how you found people. How did you decide who to ask advice from? How did you find your own, unofficial mentors?
So in college, I had a really good mentor, my advisor. I was a psych major until my senior year, the end of my junior year. And he came to me and he said, so you're going to get your master's? And I said, yes. And he's like, I have a question for you. What would you say if a woman came? This was Dr. Joe. He was at Idaho State. He said, what would you do if a woman came to you and told you her husband was beating her? And I said, well, I tell her she needs to leave. And he's like, exactly why you can't be a therapist. He's like, you can't tell her to leave. And that's your personality. He's like, Is that what you want to do as you, DeeDee? Yes. But as you, the therapist, you have to get her to see that. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that because then she's still in the situation, still getting hit. And he's like, exactly. He's like, so I want you to go down to comms, and I've already arranged all your classes so you can still graduate, and you have a new advisor, and this is what you're going to go do.
Wow.
So I think it's about listening when people give you feedback, right? People that you trust, of course, not people that you don't trust, but
Right.
when people that you trust give you feedback about yourself as they're seeing you, how you show up in the world, actually taking account to it and actually taking it on and thinking about it.
Yeah. So there's an important theme there as well, that, again, that we've talked about. It's that mentors can open your eyes to things that you personally weren't seeing.
Yes.
An invaluable set of tools is somebody who's been around a little bit longer and sort of says, I see the path you're on, but I don't think that's the path that you want, not the path that the mentor wants. It sounds to me like he was saying, I think this other path would present much greater opportunity for you. You were smart enough to listen, and it seems to have worked out pretty well. And again, obviously it's from somebody you trust, but you're definitely demonstrating the value of having mentors who can see beyond the horizon that you have, particularly as a much younger person.
Yeah, and I think that we fail generationally by not asking in our culture, right? Other cultures do this. They live with the generation before them. They work with the generation before them. They honor the generation before them. They ask questions. What did you do? Why did it work? How did it not work? And there's something about our, capitalism mentality in the US that I don't see that always happening. And so it's a little bit of a step back that we actually have to take it back on as super valuable to learn from somebody who's been down the road before you.
So, what advice would you give to somebody on that? We actually had a nice pause because, Bill, I'm thinking about our conversation with Mel Yokoyama.
Yes.
He was born and raised in Hawaii, and he talked about the elders in the community and how respected they were. And he was in a community that was inherently had these mentors, these elders that helped him grow into a young man. Then he leaves and actually joins the Navy and has nobody as a mentor and has to kind of figure that part out. And so I'm curious what advice you would give to, people, and actually this is age independent because we could all have it regardless, right, of our age. What would you recommend to them to find that elder community of people they would trust, people that they would, be willing to hear the advice that they would give and create that community itself?
Okay. I think that you have to take the time to look inside yourself and know what you want, and then look and see who's actually on that path, and then go ask them, hey, I'm really interested in this. How did, they're the questioning again. How did you do this? Why did you do it? Do you think I could do it? But you have to know yourself a little bit to know where you want to go directionally.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if you don't know where you want to go, if you see somebody doing something that's working and you say to yourself, wow, that's really working, right? And that's, for me, that's the compassion piece, is we're not supposed to know everything. Knowing and experience is what teaches us.
Right.
So being okay to say, hey, I don't know, right? I have no idea. I'm 19, I'm 20, I'm 21, I'm 35 and pivoting, I'm 50 and pivoting. I've never done this. I don't know what to do. Who do I know out in the world who may have done this? What group of people do I have, on my list of contacts that I could text and say, hey, I'm going through this. Do you know anybody?
Yeah, actually, I would tell you that continues well into later life as well. Trying to find, in my own experience, trying to find retirees who seem to be working it out very well, and retirees who are struggling with what it means after they've left 30 or 40 or 50 years of whatever they were doing before, and now retirement. So my only point is this continues through life as far as I'm concerned. It's finding people that you respect who are ahead of you in that line. And they, as you said, they have found something that seems to be working. Maybe I ought to go ask them.
Yeah. But you have to really let go of the ego and be okay with, I don't know.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I'm clearly not the smartest person in any room I walk into. So I agree with you. You have to be okay with asking questions because you don't know. It's okay.
Yeah.
What if you're alone in the room, Bill? I'm just curious.
I'm sure there's somebody close by that's still smarter.
I'm thinking no. Go.
So, DeeDee, you have this experience in learning how to communicate effectively, and you've created a framework based on suggestions from your mentors on learning what it is that has been your communication style and how you can effectively help people communicate well. And you've talked about how that communication can really help with mentors and mentees. Can you expand on that some?
Yeah. I'm going to expand on the tool itself as an example of like how to go about it. So we've talked about the C part is compassion. So having compassion for yourself that you may not know everything and that you want to know things. And then having compassion that there's maybe somebody out there that actually wants to share their knowledge. And seeing it, a lot of people, they say, oh, I can't go ask my boss this. Well, why not? Right? And the boss will be like, well, I can't just go share, people I worked with, well, I can't just go share with my team. Well, why not? Right? Like, hey, you can come up with a way that's not directive, that's communicative. And hey, I don't know if you've thought about something like this, but you could do it like this. And I don't, like from the mentee, I've never had this experience. Have you? So coming up with some level of lack of ego and compassion for each other as human beings is definitely the first step. And then accepting that conversation is going to be a process, that it's not just, a statement of POV or a one question and you're done and out and you know everything, right? It's literally, we're in this process of being human. And the only way we get to do that together is through communication. And we have a lot of different forms of communication. And some of them I say are very detrimental to this. So, social media teaches us to just state POVs and then you go away and you never really have a dialogue. So we do have to readjust a bit from what we're doing online all the time to being with people and having more process conversations that are not just one statement or one and done, I call them, right? And then really accept the fact that in that process, you're learning something and be committed to the fact that you want to learn something. And that's where the, having curiosity comes in and accepting the fact that I need to learn something, or I'd like to learn something, or I'm curious to learn something. But it's a shift in mindset.
What do you see as the big shift in mindset? It goes from what to what?
I think the big shift is that we go 1,000 miles an hour as humans, right? So, and we just think that we need to do so many things in a day instead of understanding that like maybe 2 or 3 steps is all you need to push whatever you're doing down the road. It doesn't need to be, dialing for dollars, 40 phone calls in a day. Maybe it's being like with one person, one mentee, one mentor, one client, one child, one coach, one teacher for more than that quick conversation, right? So it's really like sticking in it to learn something, not just check the box that you did it.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying learning is like relationship development as well as actually the learnings that happen.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I would also suggest, at least what I got out of that, was a conversation about prioritizing your day, as opposed to letting the day just happen with 1,000 different interactions, choosing the interactions that you think are most important, and then spending the time on them necessary to actually make it a meaningful interaction, as opposed to quick drive-by calls and that kind of stuff that there's a tiny bit of communication, but not great understanding that comes out of that stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. And setting it up at the beginning of your day or the end of the day before. So you know like what you're doing when you get up. And don't just fill every 15-minute slot with something.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
give it room. Don't back end yourself. Give it room so you have, oh, I gotta go. No, give it room so it can develop in that, process.
Yeah. This is actually for me a very powerful conversation that I wish somebody had had with me a long time ago, particularly before I became the executive director at the lab that we used to work at, where there were just nothing but back-to-back meetings. And so the only time I had the time to let it breathe is okay, if you want to come talk to me, come talk to me at 5, because then nobody else is scheduling my calendar and now I can let it go longer. So that's an important conversation to say, force your calendar to support the priorities that you're trying to set.
Yeah, exactly. And like allow the creativity to show up. I mean, do you remember when Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley and people thought it was funny that they had, air hockey and, pool
Right.
tables, foosball. No, they're stopping long enough. So what they've done before can process in our brain to have some sort of outcome.
Yes.
It's like taking a walk outside. The Japanese have something called forest bathing, and it's about, walking outside in nature, basically to let things, actually process and actually come up with the good idea, come up with well, it also is a calming mechanism too, but that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I agree with you. Meditation, teachers talk about it. I personally have a pool table instead of a dining table in my house so that when I'm working from home or I'm writing, I can go shoot pool, or I'm in between clients. I just go, shoot 9 ball.
Well, remind me not to bet
Yeah.
against you in
Yeah.
a bar.
Yeah. Bet on her. Don't bet against her. So the other thing that was a little bit of a revelation for me as you were talking. I mean, you were talking about coming at it from the mentee's view in finding reasons to share stuff. The mentees reaching out and saying, "How did you do this?" But another thing that I learned much later in my career was the value of, as the mentors, not presuming that everybody knows how to be successful in certain areas. And we were in the midst of COVID. One of the best attended meetings that I ever set up was when I said, I'm going to talk to I'm opening it up to as many people want to show up to hear about how do you get promoted around here. And it's like, I'm just going to chat about, here's the way to approach that problem. And it was the best attended meeting and most interactive meeting that I had in my entire time as the executive director, even though there were other things that were much more focused and I thought there would be great interaction. And I had plenty of good meetings, but never was there such a broad topic. And all it was saying, I'm just going to go talk to them. And so my point is, and you made it briefly, but I don't want it to be lost. The mentees have things that they can share, but the mentors could take a very different approach to things and say, there's some stuff that I've learned along the path. I should make some time where it isn't drive-by conversation. I'm going to set up a time where I'm going to share some ideas about how to be successful. And people can come or not come, but the number of people who come will be surprisingly large in my estimation. And so I didn't want that. You made that comment sort of in passing, and I think that was a really powerful discussion, not only from the mentee side, but the mentors thinking about what are the things I could share that would generate lots and lots of conversation about how to be successful or how to solve certain problems.
You know
Yeah.
what that reminds me of, Bill, is a story from years ago. I don't even know if you'll remember this conversation, but I certainly do, where I came to you and I said to you, they want me to be a mentor. Like, do I have the knowledge to share? And you said, you think? Of course, duh. Yeah, of course you do. It's your time. And this was years ago, right? So sometimes it's also shining a light on, we all have knowledge to share and we all have, the opportunity to share it, even if we're not aware of that.
Yeah, so DeeDee, it looks like you wanted to comment, so I'll I'll shut up and let you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that is really great to set up a Socratic conversation where you just are going to be in the conversation like we are today, but at work sharing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I know everybody's interested in this. Let's have a conversation, and it will just show up how it shows up, and it's authentic and guided.
Mm-hmm.
I'm completely with you. And so to Angela's point, if you're succeeding in whatever you're doing, you might be relatively junior, but if you're succeeding, you have things to share.
Yeah.
Unquestionably, you gain some success along the path. Don't you think other people might be interested? So the mentoring can happen at a variety of places along your career path, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Well, I've always had this thought of like, what if evolution is that? Like that we learn from the people before us, like what not to do and what to do. And then we would consider evolution that would be more productive because then we look at this process that way. I'm like, we're supposed to evolve, right? Just the word itself. So then you would take into account the people before you if we
Mm-hmm.
used it more often and more structurally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we did that, first of all, here's some takeaways that I heard today. It's someone you trust. These elders are someone you trust. The people ahead of us were someone you trust, right? And if you learn when people are giving you feedback when you're young or throughout your whole career or your life, it doesn't have to just be at work, and it's from people you trust, then that's something to really take in and just be an indication. And the way to come about it is with curiosity. The whole point in your compassion piece of your model is certainly about curiosity. That's been a huge theme of today's conversation, as well as coming with humility and taking your ego out, right? And then know that this is about relationship building. This is not a one and done conversation. It's actually relationship building. And so it's going to take a process to continue to learn from the person that you're having the conversations with. And in that learning side, know that you're not only doing some learnings from the wisdom that the person ahead of you is sharing, but also developing a relationship with that person. And the way to be most effective with that is to really prioritize your day and recognize what are the conversations and what are the relationships that are most important to you. And it's less about getting as many of those check boxes ticked off your checklist and much more about what is going to bring the most, I don't want to say revenue, but the most value to your life, your career, your work, the decisions that you have ahead of you. What didn't I capture?
That was a great summary.
Angela, I think you covered it quite well. So with that, thank you for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share it with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.